Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing the mid-year freakout tag. This is a tag in which we get to chat about all of the great books and the not so great books that we've read so far this year, and we get to freak out about all the books that we still have to read in 2022. All of the questions for this tag will be in the description box below for you in case you would like to tag along too. Now let's get to my answers. Of course I can't just mention one. I have 5 favourites so far this year, which is kind of really exciting. I'll talk about the one that I think if I had to pick one, I might pick this one. It's also one that I read quite early on in the year. It's Open Water by Caleb Azamar Nelson. Now this book I actually got out from the library and I adored it so much that I just needed to get myself a copy, and I'm so glad that I did. It's such a quick read and I can't recommend it more highly. This is one of the most impactful books I've ever read. This is a contemporary literary novella published in 2021, and it's just so beautifully done and so moving. It's actually narrated in second person from the perspective of a young Black British man who's a photographer, and he, quite early on in the book, he meets a Black British woman who he develops a really, really close relationship with. She's an artist too, she's a dancer. They both sort of went to what I think in Britain are called public schools. Here we would call them private schools. Basically, they're both well-educated, creative people living in London and quite successful who connect over several shared lived experiences. It's some of the most tender, sensual writing I've ever read, and watching these two characters get to know each other in such a close, vulnerable kind of way was honestly just beautiful. It was one of those things that just makes you believe in true love. But then watching our main character as the violences, both macro and micro, that he experiences being a Black person in London, and in particular being a Black man, whether that's watching atrocities happen in America to Black people or it's his own experiences with police or with other people, how these things slowly and steadily eat away at him to the point where he completely shuts down in order to survive. But in doing so, he pushes away and rejects love and affection. That really highlights what compounded trauma looks like. Those big and small moments across a lifetime, how those things add up and put so much pressure and pain on an individual. Our main character is such a big-hearted, tender, sensitive, creative soul, but because he's in a big Black body in Britain, his experience is very much shaped by that. And I still cannot get over the level of emotional impact this book had. This very, very short book had. I think the use of second person was so effective and really quite clever. I think for 2 reasons. One is the second person does have the effect of making everything feel so intimate and immediate and personal. I think it really encourages and invites empathy from the reader. But 2, second person and speaking as if something is happening to someone else, you know, the way that the narrator is speaking about you rather than himself. That is a fairly common symptom of PTSD, of talking about experiences that you have had as if they have happened to somebody else. This was his debut, and I will definitely be keeping an eye out for anything else this author writes, because if this is anything to go by, he's just an incredible talent. His is a voice I want to hear more from. Beautiful writing, absolutely heartbreaking story, but all executed absolutely perfectly in less than 150 pages. Like, this is masterful in my view. My favorite graphic novel of the year that I've read so far is The Magic Fish by Trung Le Nguyen, and this is just gorgeous. This follows a Vietnamese family who fled the Vietnam War and are now living in America in the 1990s. Our main character from memory is sort of like in his early teens, and he does speak Vietnamese, but he doesn't feel super fluent to the point where he feels comfortable expressing complex ideas or complex emotions. And his parents sort of feel the opposite, where they can speak English, but they don't feel super fluent and they feel much more comfortable speaking Vietnamese. And so in this family, between the parents and their son, there is this little communication barrier. And so what they've started doing is they have this habit of reading stories to each other. And these stories often help them communicate something that they don't feel like they quite have the words for. And so throughout this graphic novel, the different colors that you're seeing, they denote whether the scene is taking place in present day, in like 1990s America, or if they're flashbacks of his parents to their life in Vietnam, or if they are a fairy tale or a story that they are reading to each other. It's so seamless and so effective. It's just a joy to read. And as we go through the novel, we start to realize that this young boy is understanding that he is gay, but he doesn't know how to share that with his parents. There is some homophobia represented in here by other adults in this boy's life, which are pretty awful to read. But overall, this is just one of the most heartwarming, beautiful things I've ever read. And the way that it interweaves the past, the present with the fairy tale, the story, is just so well done. It was a joy to read. And it's so beautiful. Absolutely highly recommend. Might be my favorite graphic novel of all time. Then my favorite YA so far this year is Catching Taylor Crow by Amberlynn and Ezekiel Quay-Mulliner. This story is told from the perspective of Beth Teller, who is a teenage girl and she's dead. She's a ghost. She died in a car accident, but she sort of stayed behind in the afterlife as a ghost to help her father, who is not really handling her death very well. His wife, Beth's mother, she died a few years ago. She was an Aboriginal woman. Her father is a white Australian and he's a police officer. In the wake of Beth's death, he gets assigned to a sort of bureaucratic role overseeing a disappearance of an Aboriginal girl in a different small town. He gets assigned this job because everyone assumes that it's going to be pretty cushy, like he'll just have to, sign some papers and he won't have to do too much, but it will keep him occupied. Sort of an easy way to slide back into work after the death of both his wife and his daughter. And Beth, being a ghost, is sort of helping him do this. But together they sort of start to uncover a whole host of secrets and lots of crimes that have gone on over the decades in this small town that have all been covered up. And it spirals into this heart-wrenching story about the colonial history and violence here in Australia. Some of it is really difficult to read, but it's also some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read. Parts of this are told in, your regular prose, and other parts are told in verse. And the way that it sort of flits between the two is really effective. I think I'm literally just showing you prose. Where's the verse? There we go. Different points of view are sort of told in different styles, and it's really effective and beautiful to read. This is one of the best YAs I think I've ever read. It's incredible. Then we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I have started to get more into fantasy, and I've been trying out a few different fantasy authors. And my favorite so far this year is definitely The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, which is the first in her Broken Earth trilogy. I did a whole vlog trying out N.K. Jemisin. There were two books that I did not like, but this one was something really quite special. This is set in a world where the seismic activity is a lot more active than here on Earth, and there are people who harness a magic that can influence that seismic activity, but they are very much reviled by the rest of their society. And because of this frequent seismic activity, this world experiences cataclysmic events every couple of 100 years, and so this society is essentially set up and structured to deal with those events, to prepare for them and to handle them when they happen. I won't talk too much about this because, like I said, I'm pretty thorough in that vlog, which I will leave a link to in the description box below for you. I loved reading this and I cannot wait to continue the series. And then finally, a book that I read maybe a week or two ago is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is my first Becky Chambers novel, but I definitely want to read more from her. I loved this. This is a really warm, cute, almost sort of slice of life science fiction novella, I guess. It's set a few hundred years in the future after Earth has experienced a climate catastrophe. Along with that climate catastrophe, we also had all of the robots that were working in the factories, they gained sentience. And so the people of Earth went through this transition period of not forcing these robots to work for us anymore. They instead chose to leave human society and go off and experience their own life in the wilderness. And humans in this world live a much simpler life now. But nobody has had contact with the robots since they all left and went off into the wilderness. In this story, we follow a person named Dex who has decided that they want to be a tea monk. And that is essentially a person who travels around to little regional towns, I guess, and offering a service of a tea monk, which is to basically just listen to people and hold space for them and their problems, and then make them a custom cup of tea to help them feel a little bit better. And Dex is great at this job, but after a few years, they start to feel a little unsettled and unsatisfied. So they get this grand idea in their head that they want to go explore the wilderness and just be on their own. So they kind of run off and leave their responsibilities behind as a tea monk, and in the wilderness, they come across a robot. One of these robots who left human society several hundred years ago and who no one has had contact with since. This robot's name is Mosscap, and it is really interested in humans and wants to sort of see how humans are doing in the few hundred years since the robots left them, and just wants to learn all about humans and what it is that we need. And so from there, we just follow these two as they sort of get to know each other and form this very unlikely friendship, and it's just adorable. This is one of those warm hug, wholesome as hell kind of books that just, Oh, I loved it. I loved it so much. My immediate feeling after finishing reading this was that this is one of my new favorite books of all time. Like, this is up there with Amrita by Banani Yoshimoto, stuff like that. Oh my goodness, that first question took so long. Okay, let's speed this up a little bit. Question number 2 is a little bit easier. It is best sequel you've read so far in 2022. I'm not someone who reads a huge amount of series, so I actually have not read a lot of sequels this year. I think the most that I've read would be in the manga category. However, by far my favorite sequel and one of my most anticipated reads of 2022 was Lightfall, Shadow of the Bird by Tim Probert. This is the second book in the Lightfall series. This is a graphic novel series aimed at sort of middle grade age, and I just loved it. I loved book 1. It was one of my favorite reads of, I think, 2020, might have been 2021. I don't know, I can't keep track. In that, we're introduced to a young girl named Bee and a sort of weird frog monster guy that becomes her best friend. His name is Cad. And he's the last of his kind, and they end up as unlikely besties going on an adventure to try and, well, firstly to find and save her grandfather, but then in book 2 it escalates to saving the world. It's such a magical fantasy kind of landscape, and yet Bee and Cad are so just genuine and grounded kind of characters, really relatable characters. I love their friendship. They're just adorable together. And especially in this book, I feel like we got to know so many other side characters as well. We had plenty in the first book, but I feel like they really shined in this one. But it is quite tense too, because it's pretty action-packed, and like literally there is a giant beast sort of swallowing all of the light in the world, which is destroying cities one by one. So like the stakes are very high. I just love watching these two sort of figure stuff out together and how they really support each other and bring out each other's strengths. Like, saving the world is a pretty big deal. Like, it's a lot of pressure, and Bee in particular struggles with anxiety, and I've said before that I just love the way that that is visually represented in Lightfall. They make mistakes along the way, but they learn from them, and I just love watching these two grow together and their friendship. It's just gorgeous. I love Lightfall. I love this series. I already was obsessed with book 1, and like I said, I think this was one of my most anticipated releases this year. And I mean, we're only 2 books in. I don't know how many books we're going to expect, but I think this is my favorite graphic novel series. I love it. Question number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. Honestly, I could pull out like 50 books that meet that criteria, but I've got 4 here that are 4 that I really do want to get to quite soon if possible, and that I have really been looking forward to since I got them when they first came out. The first is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This one I've seen quite a few people really enjoying here on BookTube. It's a gorgeous cover, and because I've been getting more into fantasy lately, I couldn't help but pick this one up. I'm excited that I think it's a standalone. It's inspired by the Moon Goddess myth of Chinese mythology, and I've heard really good things about it. Another fantasy I picked up, mostly honestly because of the cover, is a YA title, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This one just literally, we got it in and it was so beautiful I couldn't not. But I haven't got to it yet. I definitely want to though. The next 2 are actually proofs that I got for books that came out this month, at least here in Australia. The first is The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. This is a YA title. And then a junior fiction, I think. Junior, middle grade, that sort of age range, is Karen Foxley's new book, and I think this is the beginning of a new series. Miss Mary Kate Martin's Guide to Monsters, The Wrath of the Woolington Worm. That is a title and a half. Question number 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of 2022. Now, I've said before that I'm not really someone who keeps up super closely with the new releases. I know I should as a bookseller, but one that I am very excited to read, and I'm even more excited to have gotten a proof for, is Amari, book 2. It's called Amari and the Great Game by B.B. Alston. I read Amari earlier this year, and while I wasn't blown away, I just felt the potential bubbling underneath the surface. And ultimately, I fell in love with Amari herself. So I have been really, really looking forward to this one. And when we got a couple of proofs at work, I nabbed one. I'm so excited to read this. I'm really, really hopeful that this sort of picks up where it left off, but takes it to that next level that I was hoping for, and just irons out a little bit of that debut vibe with some of the pacing issues that I personally felt like the first book had. But like, the foundation blocks were all there for what I hope will be an absolutely incredible sequel. Question number 5, your biggest disappointment so far this year. That is an easy question to answer, and anybody who's been watching my channel lately will know exactly what I'm talking about. The Well of Ascension. One of the worst books I have personally ever read. And I know people think that I'm being hyperbolic when I say that, but I genuinely feel that way. I went from so excited about dipping my toes into the Sander fandom. Is that what it's called? The Cosmere, whatever. All this hype around his recent Kickstarter, conversations about him literally being the GOAT of fantasy, or at least modern fantasy, to literally having all of that shattered and feeling like I was just reading a completely different book, a completely different author to everybody else. Like, it was almost funny to me. It was comical, like how different my experience was with Brandon Sanderson to what it feels like 99% of fantasy readers have in their experience. I don't see it, and not even in a way of like, oh, we have different opinions and different tastes, but like genuinely I'm confused. I'm genuinely confused. So yeah, by far the biggest disappointment, The Well of Ascension, and honestly my experience with Brandon Sanderson in general. Question number 6 is your biggest surprise so far of 2022. And honestly, my answer to this is less a specific book and more a direction I feel like my reading has taken this year. I think in the last few years, my taste in reading has definitely been more focused on contemporary and literary fiction, especially Australian and international translated fiction, with a healthy dose of thoughtful and critical non-fiction. Obviously, with my new job working as a children's bookseller, the job that I got late last year, my reading definitely has changed, like just by virtue of me being a children's bookseller. I'm reading a lot more middle grade graphic novels and YA than I ever have before. But I think more generally, my reading has definitely taken a turn away from literary fiction, much more towards genre fiction. I think you can see that by a lot of the books that I've been talking about in this video. I think only a couple of them would classify as literary fiction. Most of them are genre fiction. And on top of that, I've also been less scared of big books. And I do think that that's also a factor in, like, big literary books are often dense and hard to get through. Whereas genre fiction, although it can still be heavy, is often, I'm generalizing here, but is often easier to read and easier to get through. Like, I can read a 400-page romance novel in a day, but there's no way I'm reading a 400 literary fiction novel in a day. You know what I mean? And honestly, this is a big surprise to me. I did not see this coming, especially with me reading fantasy and larger books more and more often. These are things that I have long said that I tend to avoid, and here I am diving headfirst in. Question 7, a favorite new author. And while part of me wants to say like Caleb Azamar Nelson, because he is definitely going to be like an auto-buy, auto-read for me, at least for his next book or two. And even Becky Chambers, even though I've only read one book from her, I do definitely want to read her back catalogue now. I can't say N.K. Jemisin because I've read 3 works from her and only loved one. The other 2 I really did not like at all. So I think my best answer has to be Kei Togaku, the author of Boys Run the Riot, this manga series. I discovered and read all 4 volumes this year, and I think it might be my favorite manga series. I did a whole review of this series, which I'll leave a link to in the cards and the description box below for you. Question number 9 is newest favorite character. Firstly, for those of you who spotted it, yes, I did skip question 8. That's because question 8 is your newest fictional crush. And I just don't really feel like I have one. I'm not someone who really like crushes on characters. I just don't really feel like that crush thing is something that happens to me a whole lot. But I am more than happy to talk about my favorite characters. I think my first would definitely be Amari from Amari and the Night Brothers. I just loved Amari. And even though I didn't adore everything about this book, like I liked it well enough, but I didn't love it in the way that I wanted to. I did absolutely love Amari, and she is the reason that I'm continuing on with the series. Then we just spoke about it, but I actually really loved both of the characters in Boys Run the Riot, or the main characters. Ro, who is the trans main character, and Jin, his best friend, or the person who develops into his best friend over the course of the series. I love them both individually, but I especially love their relationship and friendship that develops over the course of the series. It's just so wholesome and respectful, and I just adored it. And then another one where it was the 2 main characters who really made the book, that is Moscap the robot and Dex the T-Monk. I loved them both, and their interactions really they were the heart of this book, and they really made it for me. Question number 10 is the book that made you cry. And in case you haven't been around for very long, I am a crier. Generally speaking, and also when I read. I cry when something's beautiful, I cry when something's sad, I cry when something's happy. I'm crying left, right, and center. So honestly, most of the books I've spoken about in this video at least made me tear up. But I think the book that has made me cry the most would be Open Water. I cried a huge amount while I was reading it, but I've also continued to cry when I try and tell people about this book, when I just talk about it, when I just think about it. I read this 6 months ago, and it has stayed with me that strongly. A book that I have not yet mentioned in this video, though, that did also make me cry was Guardians of the Louvre by Jiro Taniguchi. Now, this is a huge graphic novel by one of my favorite mangakas. I've read a few of Jiro Taniguchi's works now, and I just adore his really like minimalistic, mindful stories that are like next level slice of life. And this one was commissioned by the Louvre, and it's just about this middle-aged man who goes to the Louvre, but he gets a temperature and sort of has this fever dream where he meets the guardians of the Louvre. And the last chapter in particular just made me sob like a baby. I loved this. Books that made me happy. The first one would definitely be A Psalm for the Wild Built. This was just one of those books that I hugged after reading and wanted to like reread bits, and just I couldn't stop smiling and crying and giggling and I don't know, all of the feelings, but in a really happy, positive kind of way. I loved this book. Another book that I don't have here to show you because I'm lending it out to a friend that made me really happy was Social Cue by Kay Kerr. This is an Australian YA novel written by an autistic author about an autistic main character. This kind of has rom-com vibes, but it also has a whole lot of heart to it. And I just loved the main character. I loved the whole message of the story, and it also just makes me so happy to be able to hand sell this better. I love this story, and pretty much everyone that I've recommended it to at work has come back and said they loved it too. Question 12, the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. I have two to share with you. I think one would definitely be this hardcover edition of A Magic Steeped in Poison. This one was quite hard to get in Australia, and I mean it's a pretty hardback, but like just this cover art is gorgeous, and I love the way that it wraps around. Also love the royal blue end pages. It's just really pretty. I think the coolest cover though has to go to this hardcover edition of Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi that I managed to get secondhand on eBay. This is incredible. It's sort of like, it looks like a close-up kiss, like almost comic book style, but this sleeve is translucent, and so it kind of comes off and gives you a whole different half of a cover, which makes a whole different image. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before, and I think it's incredible. And question number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And honestly, I could just point to my shelf and say most of these, because I have so many books on my shelf that are unread that I want to get to, and a lot of proofs that I've recently picked up from work that I need to get stuck into too. Too many books and never enough time. Just that age-old reader problem. But there are a couple of series that I'm really excited to get to or to finish. The first would definitely be the rest of the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. So that's the Obelisk Gate and the Stoned Sky. I just love the 5th season so much, and I don't want to wait too long before reading the rest of the series because it's quite a complex world that N.K. Jemisin has going on, and I don't want to feel like I've forgotten things and have to reread and then never get to it. So it's pretty high up on my priority list. Another series that I am really keen to get to, although there's not as much pressure on me, I don't think, is Becky Chambers' Wayfarer series. I think these are the first 2 books for this series, and after reading what is it? I always forget this title. A Psalm for the Wild Built. After reading this and loving it so much, I'm definitely keen to finally get to these. These came to me in a wild book box quite a while ago that I opened up and never got to, and I feel like it's getting to about that time. Because if I love these even close to how much I loved A Psalm for the Wild Built, I feel like Becky Chambers might become a new favourite author. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I don't want to put too much pressure on it, but it's hard not to when you love a book that much. I'm really hoping I enjoy these too. Like I said, I have so many other books that I want to and need to get to, but those are a few that I'm thinking about at the moment. But that is my mid-year freakout tag. That's sort of the lay of the land and how my reading's been going so far in 2022. I feel like there has been quite a big shift in my reading, like I spoke about, and I'm really enjoying exploring genres that I haven't really dipped my toe into much before, like fantasy. And although it's been a bit of a roller coaster with some very high highs and some very low lows, I'm enjoying the ride. Let me know how your reading's been going so far this year. Let me know if you've got any new favorites or any particularly severe disappointments. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end of the video. And a big thank you goes to my patrons over on Patreon for all of their support. And especially big thank you goes to Olivia, Lynette Brown, Laurie, and Ian Yitzhak for their very generous support. And I will see you in another video soon. Until then, happy reading and much love. Bye.